So it may be a surprise to some of you, but it takes more than a bow tie to be an economist. And while our guest, Dr. Elliot Eisenberg, has not one but two full drawers of bow ties, he also has a very long list of impressive credentials, starting with a BA in economics with first-class honors from McGill University in Montreal. Dr. Eisenberg, did I happen to tell you my name is Gill? We're very close on that. Dr. Eisenberg earned a master's and a PhD in public administration from Syracuse University. Dr. Eisenberg is the chief economist for Graphs and Laughs LLC, a Miami-based economics consulting firm that serves a variety of clients across the United States. He's a frequent speaker at large national corporations and small rural economic summits, for which we're thankful. Dr. Eisenberg, a former senior economist with the National Association of Home Builders in Washington, D.C., he's also the creator of the Multifamily Stock Index, the first nationally recognized index to track the total return of public firms principally involved in the ownership and management of apartments. The author of more than 85 articles and serves as an expert advisory board of the Mortgage Market Guide, and is a regular consultant to several large real estate professional associations, hedge funds, and investment advisory groups. In December of 2010, Elliot began writing a daily 70-word blog on the economy, hence the website's name, econ70.com. This was a personal challenge that he did. He decided to take a current economic concept or issue and explain the topic in 70 words or less every day. And you can sign up for that by going to www.econ70.com. I get his blast. There's so much more to Dr. Eisenberg, but let's just welcome him now and hear what the bow tie economist and how he's going to untie the economic knot for us. Dr. Eisenberg, welcome to the stage, sir.
It's the best I may have ever had. Wow, what a warm introduction. My gosh, thank you. That was just stellar. I'm almost speechless as a public speaker. It's a bad thing or a good thing, as the case may be. So thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And before I begin, I want to share with you a quick story about Grass Valley that I didn't even know this town even existed. I'll be quite frank. I mean, I knew it existed, but you know. And so my stepdad is he retired, a post-production video editor. And he had these huge machines, these huge switches in front. The rooms were always like 58 degrees. It was chilly, it was cold, it was freezing. And these rack-mounted stuff and this big thing, post-production. And it said GVG on it, Grass Valley Group. Never thought much about it at all until today when we were driving back in it. It hit me like 100 pounds of potatoes. And the best story about this is my daughter. She's now 25, but this is about 18 years ago, a long time ago. My stepdad changed jobs, and my daughter walks into his office, you know, the post-production place, and she sees the big switch is still there, different switch, but she's a little kid, and she goes, "Oh, Grandpa, thank you, thank God you didn't forget your buttons." So this is my image of Grass Valley, is my daughter just ogling this thing and wanting to touch everything on it. And little did I know that one day I'd come to the town where these machines were made, and my stepdad made a living, and my daughter was all excited, and thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, now with this lovely story out of the way, and the food being delicious, and the introduction being spectacular, I now have to give you, I think, is somewhat bad news. Just a little, not too much, but a little bit. I think we do end up in a recession here. Now, up until a long time ago, I thought we'd have a recession late in 23, early 24, right? People said, no, we weren't. Then everybody came to my view of thinking, yeah, we're gonna have a recession. But now they're starting to go away from me again. So I was in the minority, I became part of the majority, and now I'm in the minority. Because the Wall Street Journal just did a survey of economists, and now 52% say no recession. So the consensus is no recession. That's not a big consensus, but nonetheless, it's something, I guess. Turns out when it's above 40, we end up with a recession. So I'm still not thinking we're out of the woods. But I don't want you to perseverate about this recession notion. This is unproductive for two reasons. First, there are two kinds of recessions, the one we remember and the ones that we don't remember. For those of us old enough in the room to remember, there aren't many here, the 74-75 Arab oil embargo recession, that was a really, really bad recession. That was the worst recession since the Great Depression. Then came the 81-82 second Paul Volcker recession. Wow, I won't say Paul Volcker again. Yeah, right. Monetary policy hit the wrong tone there or something, right? So that was a really bad recession. That was the worst recession since the Great Depression, superseding the 74-75 Arab oil embargo. And then came, of course, 08-09 global financial crisis, housing bust. Those are three terrible recessions. There have been like 7 or 8 other ones that you don't remember. For example, 1970, 1980, 1990, and 2000. You don't remember them. This will be a recession like that you won't remember. That's my expectation. There's nothing really wrong with our economy. It's running too hot. There's a little too much inflation. The Fed raises rates. We lower things, and we have a little recession. We move on. That's one way. The other way to think about it is, look, if a good economy, running on all cylinders, high employment, good job growth, low inflation, is a 10, and a terrible economy, like 08-09, when the banking crisis almost collapsed and things were really is a 0. Don't think of the pending recession that we're likely to have, in my opinion, as a 0. Think of it as a 4. And if we avoid a recession, and I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, we end up at a 6. Okay, 6 and 4 are different. A 6 is better than a 4. I got it, but it's not 10 versus 1. That's the point. We're not going to have spectacular, unbelievable growth with a soft landing or horrible, disastrous stuff if we have a recession. So I want you to think, instead of thinking about 2024 being, at best, not best, likely, below trend, kind of not so great. I'll explain why, but that's what I want. This is not going to be a bad recession if we have it, and don't think of it as binary. Think of it as a continuum, good, bad, and we're somewhere in the middle, essentially. That's what's really more important to think about, because interest rates are high and they're going to eat away at us. To give you a stupid way of thinking about this, if you're a man and you're in the room, chances are you have prostate problems, cancer, because almost every guy dies with prostate cancer. You have a little bit of prostate cancer. If you live long enough, it'll kill you, but usually something else kills you first. It's like interest rates. They're up long enough, they're going to kill you. Hopefully they come down quick and we'll be a void, but we'll see. Prostate cancer, interest rates, unbelievably, they're related. Yeah, okay, who knew? I'll give you some other interesting insights before we're done, but let's look at the first thing. This is GDP. GDP came out today, 4.9, like jokingly ridiculously high, like not high, like unbelievably high. No one could have, I love the mood lighting. You're looking very sexy, by the way. So this is 70% of GDP, household consumption. GDP went up 4.9%, 2.7 points, so 56, 57%, I'm doing the math quickly here, was because of household spending. Households are spending their brains out. We can't stop spending money. I'll explain why we can't and why I think it probably ends, but it's been unbelievable. Then there's corporate investment in equipment. Inventories jumped up a lot. And that was 1.3 percentage points up, so 25%. So 80% roughly was this. And then government spending has been very strong because the budget deficit doubled last fiscal year, which ended September 30th, fiscal 23. It went from $1 trillion to $2 trillion. And let me tell you, $1 trillion of spending in an economy of $25 trillion or 26 is a lot of money. That's over. And even exports minus imports, which I thought were going to be worse, because as the dollar went up in value, because our interest rates went up more than other countries, it pushed the dollar value up. That would hammer exports. Exports weakened, it's true, but imports friggin' collapsed because we're buying less stuff, because we're now doing more Taylor Swift concerts at $3,000 a ticket, and we can't afford to buy a Weber grill or a Grass Valley switcher, no longer made, I get it. So imports fell even faster than exports, driving up this. So every single friggin' term was great. This I think will weaken. That I think will weaken because of rates. That's going to weaken because of politics, and we can't afford it. And this will end as well. So this is not the last hurrah, but it's going to weaken, and next year won't be so good. So here's the story. Let's begin with automobile sales. They're ridiculously good. And this is an anomaly. When the Fed raises interest rates to slow down the economy, what do they expect? They expect to whack interest rate-sensitive sectors of the economy. They expect to whack housing and automobiles and then subsequently commercial construction, right? But what happens to car sales? They go up. That's crazy. This is a hangover of COVID. Our economy is strong, surprisingly strong, like the Q3 GDP shows, because of this hangover from COVID. We are desperate to do stuff, to experience things, to buy things we couldn't buy, cars, because here we get COVID, so we're all going to die. There's no need to buy a car. And I wanted to buy a hearse, but they were unavailable, okay? So then we all moved from the Bay Area to Grass Valley, and the subway, the BART's not so good here. They haven't extended the line yet. So we all want a car, and then supply chains crack. You can't get the semiconductors for the car. Car production slinks down badly and takes a long time, and now it's finally better. There's a UAW strike. That'll end quickly. No one really cares. It's meaningless. It may cause inflation a little bit in wages, but I don't think it's a really big deal. And they settled with Ford, so automatically GM and Stellantis are going to make a deal. But this shouldn't be happening. But it happens because of COVID. Secondly, the next story is housing. Housing should also be crashing, but it's not. If you look here, first multifam did really well, single fam collapses, and now it's changing. Single fam is up, multifam is down. This past quarter, Q3 that just ended, residential construction added to GDP for the first time in a year and a half. So here we're raising rates like there's no friggin' tomorrow, and autos and housing are doing well, both precisely because of COVID problems that were there from before. And we're trying to get back to normal, but we still have this hangover, a positive hangover, but a hangover from COVID. Excess demand for goods, strong demand for services, and so on. Services, not goods. Autos that are good, weirdly. Construction that's good because they dropped interest rates. We all refinanced our house. Now you've got a 2% 30-year mortgage. Even though you had octuplets, you're not going to move from your house because your mortgage payment will double. That's causing housing to do well. These are all artifacts from COVID. How long they last? I think they're kind of going to end, but maybe not. Now, let's look at the 70% of GDP. This is 70% of GDP. It's consumer spending. It's us doing things, buying goods and consuming services. Going out to a movie, buying a box of Kellogg's Corn Flakes or whatever it is, a new pair of pants, getting your hair done, or buying a suit or something. There's been no deterioration. If you close one eye, take a finger, and you cover up the COVID ditch, use your middle finger. You like that? You don't even see it. The monetary stimulus was so strong from the central bank, lowering interest rates, and fiscal stimulus was so strong from Congress and the president. 3 times we got stimulus checks, right? These checks were, in retrospect, a terrible mistake. They should never have happened. We should have given money to people who lost their friggin' job. Instead, they gave all of us money, which was ridiculously stupid. But, no one knows these things in advance. I ended up, as I always say, marrying the woman who became my ex-wife. Things look good at the time, they don't work out so well. No one knows the future, okay? But this is very strong. There's no weakness here. And this is continue through Q3. So the latest piece of data, the month for September, is going to be good too. I don't have the September data. This is terrific, but I think it ends. And here's why. First, household net worth is going nowhere. The stock market's doing nothing. The Russell 2000s in, where's the person who was here sitting in the best chair? Yeah, the Russell 2000 is now back at June of 22. The NASDAQ's in 10% down. This woman's leaving. She's so upset with what I said about the stock market. She's actually walking out. Thanks for that Grass Valley welcome. Yeah, I love you too. Let that be a warning to you guys if you leave. Yeah, you get ridiculed, yeah. She came for the other speakers and she leaves when I show up. Wow, it's crucial. It's hard. It's harsh. It's harsh. It's okay. I'll remember you. So net worth, house prices, they're not doing much nationally, place to place. So between house prices and stock prices going nowhere, this is the current new net worth of households. It's higher than it was 2 years ago. It peaked out in December of 21, because the stock market peaked out on January 3 of 22. And since then, 18 months of nothingness. This one's higher by $8 or $9 trillion in real terms. So the point is, household net worth isn't doing anything. Conversely, here, it went up by $40 trillion in 7 quarters. Well, $40 trillion in 7 quarters, we can spend our brains out. It was easy. It gets a little harder now. We're still doing it because we have excess savings, which I'll get into in a couple of seconds. Then there's savings rates. Our unemployment rate's 3.8%. We have full employment economy. Yet, savings is utterly anemic. Now, it comes down here, and that generates more spending. Okay, that's in the short run good, but it only can go down a little more. It can't go down much more. So we're beginning to run out of runway on savings. We have a full employment economy, and no one can save any effing money. This is a little disconcerting. And then there's credit card use. Oh, yeah, let's just use the credit card. Interest rates are what, 37.99% or 18, 22, average is 24. It's gone way up. So our wealth isn't going anywhere. We're not saving any money out of income, and we're using our credit card more. This is going down because President Biden's forgiven student debt. Not the one he did originally. The Supreme Court said no, but he's done other stuff for teachers and firemen and policemen and stuff like that. But this is a little worrying. So we're using our balance sheet to keep our spending up. I don't know how long this can last. I am somewhat skeptical this can continue for much longer, but so far it's lasted a long time. And this is why. Wages don't keep up with inflation. Inflation last year was 9%, June over June or July over July, 21 to 22. Who got a 10% pay raise here? Raise your hand. Hey, yeah, let's talk to you two guys. Yeah, you give your guys a 10% pay raise? You give anyone? No, okay, yeah. You did. He did. You did? Oh, yeah, you were here. Did you give them 10%? No, of course not. You wouldn't have a business. So workers are losing money. So they're using their credit card and they're reducing their savings rates out of disposable income. That makes sense, but it can't go on forever. That's my concern. And you see it here. If you look at the prior trend in income earning, we would be here now. That's $1 trillion below where we are. Now, in 14, something happens. In 14, we have a slope of this line. If you take this slope and extrapolate it, we're over here somewhere, right? By contrast, this slope, extrapolate it, goes here. Something happened in 14. It doesn't matter what. I want to go back 5 or 6 slides now and show you spending patterns. 14, this was the old slope, and then that's the steeper slope. It went like that in 14. Spending went up because friggin' income went up. But now income isn't all that high. It's higher than it was, but it's not high as it should be. So that line that you just saw earlier on back here, how can that line keep staying with income not catching up to its pre-COVID trend? We use credit cards, we use other things to do it, but that's not a long-term solution, I think. That's what, now this could conceivably change, and wages could go up faster than inflation, but not with interest rates at 5 3/8. That's going to put a damper on, dude. That's dampering your activity. You're saying, well, I don't want to invest in trucks, or I don't want to invest in this, or I don't want to invest in another warehouse because the cost of capital is higher and the hurdle rates are higher for ROA, ROE, ROI, whatever it is, right? So this is a serious problem. Now, inflation's coming down. Wages will probably come down with it. As we discussed that. And then there's this. Okay, this is causing me a lot of headache. I'm angry here. Because a month ago, at the end of September, BEA and the Council of Economic Advisors said, oh, we're wrong, guys, sorry, we're wrong. There's an extra $500 billion in excess COVID savings. We just didn't find it. $500 billion, and that's a lot of money. We're burning down the COVID savings at a rate of $80 billion a month. That gives us 5-6 more months. So we thought that the money would run out conceivably as early as end of September, so 3 weeks ago, end of Q3. Well, now, and the earliest, end of Q1, 24. That's a big difference. So suddenly there's a lot more money in the system than I thought there was. So that's a big change. So yeah, maybe we avoid the recession. There's enough money in the system. Inflation keeps falling. The Fed lowers rates. We get a little lucky. We'll discuss other times we've had luck and avoided a recession. Now, this is inventory. It's getting better as you see this improvement, and it's slowing down now. But the inventory improvements help the economy. I'm not sure it'll help it more because, again, I'm picking on you because I see you. You don't want to increase your inventory because it's very expensive, and you're fearful there'll be a slowdown. Whether there'll be a recession or not, no one knows. But the slowdown doesn't make you say, oh, let's get more things in our warehouse. Not so exciting. So that's not going to help us. Then there's supply chains. They were a problem, but they've gotten better. So the cost of goods has actually gotten cheaper. buying things, the prices were here, COVID drives them up here, now they're coming down, they're actually getting cheaper. That will encourage purchases of goods a little bit, so that's a helpful thing to the economy. China's economy is weak, they export stuff to us, they export their deflation to us, bringing down the cost of goods. That's helpful too. There's a lot of good news. Here, oil prices. This has caused a lot of inflation. That was COVID, and then we had a war in Europe, the stupid shooting war in Europe. That was inexplicable, but I digress. So that caused inflation. Then it brings it down. Now it goes up again, but it's kind of balancing around now at 80, 90 bucks a barrel. Even though there's a potential bad war potentially brewing in the Middle East, oil markets aren't particularly concerned. This could change, right? But oil, so there's a lot of good news here. Look, I'm going to go back and review the good news. There's still more. You haven't finished. There's more COVID savings than we thought. Inventories have been going up. They're going to stop going up. Global supply chains have gotten better, driving down the cost of goods. Energy prices are largely flat, and the U.S. is producing a hell of a lot more oil than they ever did before. We're breaking records every week in oil production, as is Brazil and Guyana as well. So even if the Arabs and the Russians produce less, I'm not sure it matters all that much. Then there's services. This is 50% of the entire economy, because 70% of the economy is consumer spending, and 70% of that is on services. We're buying services. Again, Taylor Swift, or the Beehive, right? Beyonce. Or now people tell me, it's the Rolling Stones. They're going to go on concert tour. 3 or 4 80-year-old men jumping around on stage at $1,000? I don't think so. I'll watch the video. It just doesn't sound very enticing if you ask me. But services are doing fine. They're not as high as I'd like them to be, but 54, whatever it is pretty close to normal. That's good. Then there's more good news. Manufacturing, which has been in a recession now for 11 months, looks like it's getting out of the recession. So there is a lot of good news out there. Don't get me wrong here. That's why we may skirt the recession. Maybe I'm wrong. We don't get a recession. Either way, it's going to be a 4 versus a 6, right? Not a 10 versus a 1. Keep that in mind. This is pretty good news too. This is the trade deficit. This one boggles the mind. It's like, just didn't really think of this. So this is exports in blue. They're going down because people can't afford our stuff, because in yen or in euro or whatever it is, our stuff's expensive because our dollar's gone up because interest rates are higher here. So our economy's better because we've overstimulated our economy compared to the Europeans and the Canadians. But it's imports that have utterly collapsed. Because who's buying PPE, personal protective equipment, from China anymore? Masks, gowns, all that stuff. That's all COVID. We're done. Imports from China. We've all renovated our house, right? You're going to renovate it again 3 years later? No, you bought all the stuff you want to buy. So our imports have come down more than our exports are coming down. That's driving up, improving this, which is the trade deficit. That's an unanticipated good. It can't go on. There's no way. It's just mathematically just will stop. So the good stuff that we got last quarter, inventories and trade and government, they're going to end. It's consumer spending that matters. That's the thing that matters. If it stays good, the economy stays good. If it falters, we're toast. But then there's bad news. This is small business. And small business men, women, that's like a lot of you guys, right? You're all friggin' miserable SOBs. Or Bs, as the case may be. It depends on the situation. This is when COVID comes. We're now almost as miserable as we were then. I mean, that's incredible. What, a little inflation's making us fearful of death and fearful of inflation? You've got to be kidding me. Let's take a J and we'll all be better off here. But, so that's not good news, right? It's not good news. Then there's CEO sentiment. It's terrible. This was COVID. This was the housing bust, global financial crisis. This is the dot-com bust. This is the S&L crisis. And that's Paul Volcker raising rates to 18%, friggin' 5 for 5. Now, this is a purely opinion survey, small business survey. And it doesn't mean as much as it used to mean. Several years ago, this data was more mimicked the economy than it does now. There's a lot of question as to why, but all the survey data, all the purely I think, I feel data is no longer as good as it was. Is it because we're all just walking around like Schroeder, you know, with a cloud over our heads in the Peanuts cartoon, essentially? Something's changed, but this is not quite as trustworthy as it was. This is CEO sentiment. I trust it more because you're a CEO of a company. You can take your bad attitude and take it out on your firm, if you will, by not expanding or hiring or laying off or whatever you end up doing, right? So this can become policy, if you will. But this is the leading economic indicators put up by the conference board. And you can see how low this number is. This is hard data, all hard data. When it falls this fast, recession, 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 recession. Their website says, we're going to have a recession next year, Q1 or Q2. Now, they've said it was going to be Q4. Now they've pushed it off. It keeps being delayed because of consumer spending and pent-up demand and car sales and auto, and home building being good and all that weird stuff. But this is now, they also put out lagging economic indicators and coincident economic. They have lagging, coincident, and leading. This is leading. The same group puts out coincident, and they say they're fine. They say today is good, tomorrow is going to be horrible. Whenever that happens, you end up with a recession. So this is also saying you got a recession. So CEOs aren't happy, they're not happy. This is actually monthly data from Chicago Fed, national, not just Chicago, and they're saying below trend. If you get low enough, you get a recession. But you got to get to about here to get a recession. We're not there. This says below trend growth. So here's a little bit weak, just a little weak, but a little weak. Then there's firm investment in equipment. Inventories were good. We talked about that. This is equipment, not so good. You want to buy a ditch witch or a drill or a press or an ironing board or a car or a truck for your business? No, apparently you don't. That's inflation adjusted. That's not inflation adjusted. That's a bit of a depressant too. Then there's banks. Banks don't want to lend. Why not? They don't want to lend because they have assets that have gone down in value. They bought 10-year treasuries. The 10-year treasuries are now worth less. Therefore, their ratios suck. And the easiest way to get their ratios back, there are other reasons, but the easiest way to get their ratio back is to shrink their balance sheet. And to shrink their balance sheet, it means they're not going to lend. Well, if they don't lend, when the Fed quarterly asks loan officers, are you making it easier or harder to borrow money? 50-some-odd% say harder. Recession, 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 recession. Banks don't lend, the economy doesn't do well. Now, there are the big banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, you know, the big money, and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and so on. They're doing fine because they have all kinds of ways to make money. They don't rely just on loans. They have commodities that they're trading. They have their own equity at risk, right? They do M&A deals, right? Lots of ways to make money. They can survive in a high interest rate inverted yield curve environment. But small domestic local banks, community banks, that's not so easy for them. This matters. This is another sign. So you have CEOs that are unhappy, leading economic indicators that are bad. Wealth isn't going where savings is depleted. Banks aren't lending. And you got to look. I mean, auto loan defaults are going way up. Credit card default rates are going up. You can't pay your car. Now, I can tell you a story of why they're not paying their car. That could be a good story, or not a terrible story. You bought a car back in late 21 when you were desperate for a car. And there were no cars to buy. And they were very expensive. Remember? There were no lots on the car lots. There were just lots with no cars. And you wanted a car, so you bought a used car. You bought a 20-year-old used car. It cost you $40,000. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. You overpaid for a used car. The car now has all kinds of problems with that car machine. The engine's not working well, the exhaust is broken, I don't know, whatever. And the car's vastly upside down because the price of used cars has come way down, and you send the keys back to the lender. That could be some of this. It's possible. That would be the most optimistic scenario. But if you give up your car, you give up your job, right? Probably. That's not so good. So that's troubling. It's just plain troubling. And then there's fiscal policy. Let's discuss a little about fiscal policy. Last year, officially, the budget deficit in fiscal 2023, which ended in September 30th, was $1.7 trillion. And that's an increase from $1.3 trillion in fiscal year 2022. But that's not true. The deficit was really $1 trillion in 22 and really $2 trillion in 23. The reason for the difference is student loans. And the budget includes the student loans as having been issued, forgiveness of the student loans. And then they consider the fact that it didn't happen as savings in 23. So they're cooking the books here a little bit, but the deficit went up by a friggin' $1 trillion. That's a huge amount of money. Our deficit's $2 trillion. It's 7%, 6-7% of GDP. Outside of war, we've never had a deficit this large or a pandemic. So we're really stimulating the crap out of our economy for really no good reason here. This is really bad. And now interest costs are going to go up. This is a bit of a problem. So fiscal policy, it will be contractionary in 24, I promise you, because the deficit's not going to go from 2 trillion to 3 trillion. It'll be at 2 trillion, which is a lot less spending going on in terms of growth. There's no growth here. It's like getting an allowance of $5 a week when you're a kid, and your parents say, oh, let's give you $7.50. You got a lot more spending power. But if the following year it's still $7.50, the increase in your allowance has been 0. That's the problem. So exports, they're not going to help us much. Government spending isn't going to help us because the deficit's not going to go up. Student loans have to be repaid. And there's the stupid deal made between President Biden and your former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, your guy from California. So he's now gone. Now we have another guy who's going to have the same problem. McCarthy's the third Republican guy to give up the job, lose the job. There was Paul Ryan before him and John Boehner before them. These small majorities in the Republican Party, whenever they come into power, they can't control it because the caucuses, they got the crank caucus at one end, right? The Republican Party, I'm going to go offline here a little bit. The Republican Party was known as the party of small government, right? But for the last 3 weeks, they were the party of no government, but I digress. This is the deal that McCarthy made with Biden. And if we don't have a government closure in 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, I think it's 3 weeks, I think, the 17th, I think we close, then, and we can't get the budget passed by the end of the year, there'll be a 1% across-the-board reduction in government spending. That's the law that they passed back in April or May when McCarthy did the deal. And then we have student loans, and the budget deficit's not going to be that big this year. It won't get bigger than it was last year. So fiscal policy will be meaningfully contractionary. So government, exports, inventories are not going to bail us out. It's got to be C, the first term in GDP. It must be C. If C holds up somehow, we're fine. Households spend, corporations invest, we're good to go, despite the high rates. But the high rates slowly eat away at you. This is student loans. In different situations, I will not be able to make all my monthly student loan payments, right? Even if you're making something resembling decent money, here in California, things are much more expensive. So $100,000 is probably a homeless person. But where I live in Miami, it's a rich person. I'm kidding, but you get my point. Everyone's going to have some semblances of difficulty because of this. So fiscal policies, and then the Fed raises rates. This is the story. So this shows us all interest rate hiking cycles since 1955. There have been 13 of them, excluding the one we're in right now. This is the 14th. Look at the graph. The graph shows us that every time they raise rates, with the exception of 64, 84, and 94, in circles in purple, we have a recession. There's a 10 in 13 chance you get a recession when the Fed raises rates. 3 times we don't get a recession. Why don't we get a recession 3 times? Is it that the Fed's so smart? No, I will contend that the Fed knows nothing, and they're just friggin' lucky. In 64, the Vietnam War is ramping up. That's not lucky. I mean, that's bad that the Vietnam War occurred. It was a stupid war, but that's besides the point. But fiscal policy is very stimulative. Monetary policy is very contractionary. They kind of balanced each other out accidentally. In 84, energy prices collapsed, and they fell to $8 or $9 a barrel. So fiscal monetary policy was tight, but we got a tax cut, essentially, in terms of energy prices going down, making it easy to buy gas, saving us money, and we increased our spending as a result. So we got lucky again. And in 94, what happened there? Oh, we had the dot-com boom. It was from 1990 to 2000. Are you taping me? Can you please stop? Thank you. We had the housing. We had the dot-com boom. So Netscape goes public in 1994, 95. We're minting billionaires and millionaires all over the place day in and day out. So we had tight fiscal monetary policy, but we had expansionary, just wow success in Silicon Valley, compensating. We got lucky. And the other reason it worked was those 3 years, 64, 84, 94, all magically end in the number 4. And if this recession doesn't happen, it'll be because the year ends in 24. I called Jay Powell and said, Jay, I think you're in luck. 24 is coming, and those 4 years, there's no recessions in years ending in 4. There's some indemnification going on. I don't know what it is. He didn't take my call. The story will be COVID changed behavior enough to give us a bridge to get over the high rates. Auto sales, home construction, we'll talk about the money supply, pent-up demand for services in the form of Taylor Swift, for example. And that propelled us enough, long enough, so if they could lower rates, we avoid the recession. That will be the explanation if it happens. I hope it does. We'll see. But this is like telling you, miss, you have some physical ailment that needs surgery that's not life-threatening. It's unpleasant. You hate it. You limp, or you have a terrible thing in your neck, or you can't play tennis or golf or something. And you come to see me because I'm the world's greatest surgeon for this thing. And I tell, what's your name? Marissa? I tell you, Marissa, after I do surgery, your pain will be gone. You're very excited. And I say, okay, here's the story. I've done the surgery last year 130 times. 30 times the patient got up off the table without pain. The other times, the patient died on the table and had no pain. So either way, no pain, but high probability of death. We're now on the table, Powell's cutting us up with scalpels, and we're going to die. 10 out of 13 chance of dying. Doesn't mean it'll happen, right? CEO sentiment, 5 for 5. Leading indicators, 8 for 8. These are powerful numbers, but COVID has clearly changed our economy in the short run. In the long run, except for some work from home, it really hasn't done very much. But in the short run, there's all this positive hangover that's propelling spending and keeping spending up, and that's what's going on. Now, there's one last thing here that I'm very concerned about. It's the inverted yield. Are there any bankers in the audience? Can we rip on the bankers? Oh, there's a few. I have to be nice to you guys. Okay, I'll be nice. This is the inverted yield curve. Don't look at the picture, look at me, I'm more sexy. And we'll get back to the picture in a second. The yield curve discusses the relationship between time and money, right? What do banks do? Banks borrow from depositors today, short term, and they lend long term. Because they borrow short term, they pay a little bit of money, and they lend long term, they charge a lot of money in interest. Because the bank's taking risk. The bank's taking interest rate risk, credit risk, default risk, reputational risk, liquidity risk. I mean, there's other risks too, but that's just offhand a bunch of risk. So normally, the longer you borrow for, the more you pay. Think of a home mortgage. The longer you borrow for, a 10-year mortgage is this interest rate, a 20-year mortgage is that interest rate, a 30-year mortgage is, well, a higher rate. But not right now. If you go to the federal government and say, we'll lend you money, the Fed will borrow, the Treasury will borrow money off you. 6-month money is 5 1/4. 10-year money is 4.9. So if you want to borrow for 6 months, it's cheaper to borrow for 10 years and pay off the loan in 6 months. That's a yield curve that's inverted. Normally it goes up in time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. More time, higher rate. Make sense? Yeah. Now it's like this. It's negatively sloped. Whenever the curve goes down negative, the blue squiggle goes above the red bar. When the blue squiggle is very low, like here, and there, you got a very steep curve. Banks are very happy and they make money hand over fist. Oops, wrong direction. As this goes up, this slope comes down, until it touches the line, it's dead flat. If it goes above the line, it turns negative. So there it's quite negative. Now it's coming up a little bit. You might go, oh, that's great news. It's coming down. So it's still inverted, but now not all that much inverted. Wait. Contain your enthusiasm, because if you look here, it was inverted, it's not inverted, recession, recession, recession. So the curve inverts, then the curve gets normal again after having been inverted, and then the recession shows up. So now that we're almost getting back to normal, now is when it gets very nervous, because this is historically when the recession actually occurs. So this suggests that we're getting closer to the recession. Now, we may not have a recession. I understand that. In 84, by the way, in 94, there was no inversion of the yield curve. We got lucky there, right? 66 was the last time we had an inversion of the yield curve without a recession. 8 for 8. So interest rates, 10 for 13. Yield curve inversion, 8 for 8. CEO sentiment, 5 for 5. Leading economic indicators, 8 for 8. Inventory's not going to be doing well. Government spending, not going to be doing well. Exports, not going to have it. It's all dependent on friggin' C. Now, people say we haven't had a recession yet, which means we're not going to have a recession. Right, Elliot? I go, no, I'm not so convinced. The only thing, oh no, I'm running out of time. Oh my God, really? That's terrible news. I'm talking too much. The only reason we haven't had a recession yet, that means we haven't had a recession, but we still may have a recession. Because it takes 2 years to get a recession, 24 months, 25 months. And when did the Fed raise rates the first time? In March of 22. That means March of 24 is 2 years. On average, we still got 6 months before the recession shows up. We may not get one, but we haven't had it yet. Doesn't mean we're not going to get it. And there's this pent-up demand, excess savings, autos and cars and houses doing well. Now, on top of that, monetary policy has big lags, very big lags. I'm going to give you an example here. If fiscal policy says, here's a check for $1,000, what are you going to do with that money? You'll spend some, you'll save some, whatever, but some of it gets spent. So there's instant stimulus when you get fiscal policy moving, right? Monetary policy says interest rates are higher. If interest rates are higher, do you really give a damn? If you're not borrowing money, you don't care. Are you going to say to yourself, like your kid, your daughter, well, don't go to college, kid. I don't want to stress out the educational system because interest rates are going up. Or I'm not going to have surgery because I don't want to stress out the healthcare system. That's ludicrous. Unless you borrow money to buy a house or a car, you don't care about interest rates. So this is up from Apollo, private capital group. They're saying up until the end of Q3, 3 weeks ago, we didn't even have any impact of monetary policy. And now it's going to hit us in the face, like a Mike Tyson punch. What did Mike Tyson say? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So now we're going to get punched in the face, along with leading economic indicators and an inverted yield curve and high rates and so on and so forth. I get a little nervous. Now, how long will the recession be? It's not going to be that long. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with our economy. Again, getting back to my comments of earlier, 74, 75 Arab oil embargo, 81, 82, second Paul Volcker recession. That was the first one, the second, and the global financial crisis housing bust. These other recessions are 8 or 9 months. This will not be a bad recession. Unemployment won't rise that much. GDP won't decline that much. So if you have a recession next year, GDP ends up being, 0.5%. If we don't have a recession, it's 1.25%, 1.5%. It'll be subnormal. But even if we have a recession, it won't be all that bad because the recession won't be that bad or that long. Now, let's talk about labor markets. They're the most important sector because they drive household consumption, because if labor markets are good, you can continue to spend money. That's the critical thing. And they're weakening. They're weakening. Unemployment's starting to go up. And historically, when unemployment goes up, it goes up, or it goes up. That's a mild recession of 2000. That's a bad recession of 08, 09. But they go up. You've never seen unemployment go up and then go quickly down again. It doesn't happen. Because it takes so long to get the economy to slow down. Once it starts to slow down, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like having a big ship and turning it around. It's hard work, but once it starts to turn, it continues turning for a while. Number one. Number two, the work week is shrinking. That's the equivalent of losing 3 million jobs. Last year we created like 3 million jobs. I'm saying I'm going to hire you to work for my company, and I'm going to say you don't come to work an hour later on Mondays. And then I'm going to hire you, and I'll say you don't work on Tuesdays for an hour. I'm hiring workers and kind of laying them off at the same time. This can't go on. You cannot have a healthy, good economy that's going to strive forward and do great when the work week is shrinking. And that's reducing work wages too. Inflation's not, wages aren't keeping up with inflation, and the work week is shrinking, pushing down wages a little bit more. This has a double whammy effect here. So this is not a bad number objectively, but it makes me nervous. Overtime hours are awful. Recession, 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 recession. Nothing guarantees a recession here. Don't get me wrong. Right? The probabilities are high here, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't, right? That's the key thing. But I want you to be aware that 24 isn't going to be a home run year. This is quits. Blue on this axis. Historically, here, 2.4% quit their job at the dot-com boom. 2.2% quit their job at the housing boom. Right before COVID, we had unemployment at 3.5%. It was the lowest unemployment rate since the Vietnam War in '69. 2.3% quit their jobs. Now, at the worst of COVID, it was 3%. That's when you walked into a store and you couldn't find anything to buy. Remember that? Toilet paper, Kleenex, frozen chicken wings. I asked my friends, by the way, do you go to the bathroom and poo more now that we're in COVID? Everyone said no. But you're pooing at home, not in the office. And that caused manufacturers to have to rejigger all their supply production lines to make smaller packages of toilet paper. And that took 2 years for some reason. I don't know. Anyways, that's 3%. That was amazingly high. It's come down to 2.3, but that's still, except for 2.4 once in 25 years, the highest it's been. People are still quitting their jobs, doing okay. There's still a shortage of workers because sectors like leisure and hospitality, healthcare, and K through 12 education are either just caught up or still a little behind their pre-COVID employment levels. And that's driving employment growth. And small firms that couldn't get employees for a long time because big firms were getting lots of employees, now are getting employees. It's a big deal. Last but not least, almost, look at this slide. Do you see a trend here? This is monthly job growth. Every so often it goes up, 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 up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in the last 26 months, it goes up. This is lovely news, don't get me wrong. These are great pieces, but I'm not convinced we're done yet because the lags of monetary policy are now coming to the fore. That's my concern. Back in 08, 09, in March of 08, economists said we're not going to have a recession. In March of 08, we were already in a recession. Recessions come up to you like poison gas. You aren't even aware they're there, and then suddenly you're in a recession. So I'm happy we aren't in a recession now. I'm excited, and there's a chance we avoid the recession. But don't bank on it. I think that's my point. And the last slide here is wages. They're growing too fast. So earlier on, I told you that wages weren't keeping up with inflation. Remember? That's why households had to spend out of savings, reduce their savings rates, and use credit cards. Now I'm telling you wage growth is too hot. They're both true. If wage growth stops falling and stays here at 4.2%, we will have 3% inflation. The Fed wants 2%. This must fall to here somewhere, where it was pre-COVID, to get inflation down to 2%. And Powell has said 2% is the mantra. He's not going to take 2.5%. He says 2%. There are a whole bunch of reasons he's doing this, and they make sense even though the target is wrong. That's a whole separate conversation. But now is not the time to change the target inflation rate. This has to come down. And to get this down, I think you have to get unemployment up. Now, you could argue, look, it's fallen nicely without an increased unemployment. Maybe it happens. It hasn't happened much before. Maybe this time is different because of COVID. Possibly. And let's talk about inflation. Then we'll wrap it up. Then we'll talk about local conditions quickly. Inflation. Here's a story. This is evidence of inflation. I see some inflation. This is overall inflation. A year ago, so in June or July of 22 compared to 21, inflation peaked out at 9.2%. It falls to 3% in May of this year or June, I can't remember. Since then, it's gone up 3 months in a row. Went from 3 to 3.2 to 3.7 and then stayed 3.7 last month. Why? Energy prices drove it up. But economists don't look at blue. They ignore blue. They look at red. Red's first more placid. Red excludes food and energy. You go and say to me, wow, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Economists don't look at food and energy prices? How can you live without food and energy? Life would be short and cold, or hot, as the case may be, depending on where you live. The reason is food and energy prices bounce around because of what? War and weather. That's it. Crop failure, war in the Middle East, you get the idea. Crop failure in Saskatchewan, like, who cares? It'll be gone next year, boom crop, and prices collapse and whatever. So the Fed tries to ignore food and energy. This inflation rate's 4.1. It's coming down very nicely. But they want it to be 2. 4? 2? That's still pretty far away. Something's got to give. Unemployment probably has to rise to get this damn friggin' number down because wages are in that number. So the Fed says, Let's not even look at core inflation, red. Let's look at just services, because just services is where wages are going to show up the most, right? You want to get a haircut? That's mostly wages and a little bit of rent. Oh, you want to get a suit tailored? It's mostly wages and a little bit of textile, right? You want legal services, accounting services, financial services? That's wages and a little bit of rent. So let's look at service inflation. Ta-da, the red curve. Over 5. If overall inflation, core inflation back here, is 4, there, and wage inflation essentially is 5, service inflation is 5, the Fed's not cutting rates. They may cut rates eventually, but they're going to wait. And the longer they wait, the more dangerous it becomes, because fewer banks are going to be able to withstand the inverted yield curve and so on and so forth. The high interest rates chew away at the economy. So far, we haven't felt the monetary policy impacts, but we're going to. Households are going to likely weaken in their spending patterns. Nothing here is terrible, don't get me wrong. I don't want you to walk out of here and commit suicide. I want you to drink a bottle of wine and call it good, from our sponsor especially. So what's the Fed going to do? I think they do nothing. I think we're done. I think the cycle's over. Fed funds between 5.25 and 5.5. They raised it on July 26th. The last meeting was September 20th. They have a meeting now coming up on Halloween, how appropriate, and November 1st, 2 o'clock Eastern time, 11 a.m. here in California. They're going to come out and have a press conference. They're going to do nothing. Maybe their next meeting that ends on December 13th, they raise a quarter point. I'm punting here. I'm showing you an eighth. They don't raise by an eighth. It's either a quarter or it's not. I think by December they don't have to raise. They'll see the economy starting to weaken and they're done. The key thing for you to think about is how long the damn rates stay up. The longer they stay up, the more problematic the rates become. If they start to come down quick because inflation continues to drop like a friggin' rock, or drops like a rock, we have enough stimulus from the economy, housing, autos, pent-up demand, still good, we're okay. But if that stuff, that underlying hangover from COVID stops and rates are still high, that's when I get nervous. And the last thing I want to show you before I get into local economic conditions is this. This is the money supply growth. If you look at the bottom of the graph, ignore the top part. You see here, big decline, big decline, big decline, recession, 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 probably a recession. But we have a COVID hangover effect, like autos, like housing, like pent-up demand, like excess COVID savings. We now have money supply. It grew so much, we can still survive with the declining money supply because it grew so friggin' much earlier on. These 5 reasons are reasons why the economy continues to perform objectively pretty well, despite the fact that rates are going up, and there's the lag effect, which we don't appreciate. Milton Friedman, who won a Nobel Prize in economics 30, 40 years ago, he said, monetary policy has long and variable lags. And that's it. We don't know how long they are. We don't know when they start. We don't know much. Now, let's talk about things here, and then I'll wrap it up, and we'll do some Q&A if we have time. And if not, hopefully not, I'll just leave, and no one will bother me. I'm joking. So I wanted to look at a couple things to give me an indication of what's going on. So first, I looked at 4 counties. The colors are going to stay the same for all 4 counties. So you are red, Placer is blue, Yuba and Sutter are green and purple, respectively. So you want to compare yourself, red, to all the other counties. This is population growth. There's not a lot going on here. You do see that Sutter and Nevada move sort of together. The last 10 years, purple and red move together. The other 2 counties, blue and green, move separately and are better. They're better, right? So on the population growth side, you could be doing better than you are. It's hard to grow your business if you can't hire workers. That's why you're trying to kidnap kids who are 13 now in high school. I heard that conversation. Yeah, it's illegal, but we don't care. Newsom's busy running for president. We're going to kidnap 12-year-olds and make them work 10 hours a day in the mines. I heard you. I heard. They'll be planting trees or something or whatever it is, right? So that's a problem. There are other slides that are good. This one's not so good, right? Population. Now we're looking at employment growth. Here I don't see much going on. They're all pretty much the same. There's no difference, essentially. I mean, there are a couple weirdities here or there or something, but by and large, they're all moving in exactly the same place. So employment growth, despite the fact that you're not having good population growth, your employment growth is pretty good, which means unemployment's coming in. This is okay. So this is fine. This is good. Look at the same size or near you, right? I didn't want to look at Sacramento with 1.5 million people. That seemed kind of stupid, right? And some of them are too far away. So this one's a good story, but it's the driver of this is you don't have enough people. You need to attract people here. That would let you grow presumably faster, right? Then there's median household income. You're pretty good there. There's nothing really moving on here. There's a layer of 1, 2, 3, 4. You're always second. Placer's pulling away here, as you can see, but not bad. You're okay here. Income's doing okay. And then there's bachelor's degrees. And you're good here too. Placer's better than you, but these are deadbeat counties again. Don't look to them for inspiration. Look to Placer and try and bump up your levels of education a little bit. This is all else equals something better, right? Community colleges and so on and so forth would be helpful here. Not helpful. Helpful to go to them more. The schools are good. Go. Encourage people to go. High schools, grammars, high school fairs. Yeah, go to community college. You can't afford college? Great, go to community college. You get a great degree, maybe the best education, the best, most challenging courses you'll get from teachers who really care. Right? I mean, I'm not kidding, right? And then there's establishment growth. How many businesses have opened up their doors here? And here you see Placer. Okay, Placer's bigger, obviously, but the key thing is the slope of the line. And you can see somewhere in 2012, Placer just takes off like a bat out of hell. And the other counties, there's nothing really going on. I mean, you could argue here that Sutter's catching up to you. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's not non-existent. It's true, but I'm not sure that's a really big story. It's that these are kind of flat-ish, and that one's just taken off. Go and, firebomb Placer and get people out of there. Don't go there, it's bad. Yeah, I'm kidding. But figure out what they're doing. Their secret sauce will give you some insights. So in some cases, population, you need more. Your unemployment's low, your job growth is good, your median incomes are good too. But your creativity here in terms of new companies could be better. You want to incubate more firms. Guys, on the stage here, do your thing, whatever it is. Do more of it. Help people, encourage businesses or something, right? Last but not least, you labor within the state of California. And California is not a fast-growing state. It used to be a very fast-growing state. This is 2010 through 2020. For those of you who don't know where California is, I put a convenient arrow. Those of you who did not go to community college may not be aware of where the state is. So this is okay. But now in 21, California was the 47th fastest growing state in the country. You lost 0.8% of your population. You're stuck at 39 million. You can't get above it. People are leaving because house prices are too expensive and so on. This is stuff you know. I'm not telling you something new. But nonetheless, this affects all the whole state, not just Nevada County, right? So this is, in 2021, you were 47th fastest. In 2022, you improved to negative, you were 41st fastest. You lost only 0.3% of your population. So yay, you're improving. But this is making it hard to attract people. There's no point getting people from out of state. They can't afford to live here. You only can attract people from Silicon Valley, San Francisco, whatever, Fresno, Modesto, Bakersfield, whatever. There are other deadbeat states, Oregon, thank God, nearby, but Nevada's the problem. They're so attractive, people are gonna move there, and that's where they're going, right? They're moving there to Reno and there to Vegas, right? That's the big problem. Gavin Newsom's the issue. Then there's other deadbeat states. You aren't alone. And Delaware's doing great because 3 people moved there because Joe Biden's president. Oh, wow, it's a presidential state, let's go. Population doubles. Like South Dakota, no one lives there either. But 10 people come, it doubles the population. Then there's the last graph I want to show you here. This is county growth. And you can see which counties are doing better and which counties. The blue is good, the brown is bad. So here you've got the Inland Empire, I guess, of Riverside and San Bernardino, San Diego County, LA, that's LA there. As you go further north, the numbers aren't quite so good. So you're laboring under California issues, and then within California, you're laboring under some difficult issues where SoCal is doing better than NorCal is doing generically, right? And last, that's me, I'm busy. Tell them I'm busy. Tell them I'm busy. So I want to wrap it up here. First, 24 is not going to be a great year. Don't stress about recession or not. That shouldn't really alter your behavior much. You're not financiers who are buying and selling stocks and bonds and taking options and straddles and so on. The key thing is how long the rates stay up. The Fed's may raise rates one more time, but again, it doesn't matter. All that matters is how long they keep them up, how fast inflation falls, and how quickly wage growth slows down to 3.25%. Inflation's declining, we need it to continue declining so the Fed can say, we're now thinking about about lowering interest rates. And when they say that, whoa, the market gets excited, the market will pull up and things will improve and the world will be a happy place again. We may go into a recession at that point, but it doesn't matter because enthusiasm and animal spirits improve. We'll go through it and we'll get out and it'll be brief. Lastly, I want you to follow unemployment. It has to go up some. We can argue how much, but it must go up to get wage growth to slow down. And inflation remains enemy number one. Before I close out, this is my name, my cell number, my phone number, my Twitter handle, email us and website. And you were kind enough to mention I put out 70 words every day on the economy, 5 days a week. No graphs, no ads, no charts, no links, no photos. If you want to get this and hear from me 5 days a week, I'm not sure I recommend that. The easiest way is to take out your phone, text the word bow tie, one word to the 5-digit number, 66866. That's the phone number. Be prompted for an email address. You'll hear from me every day till you die. And if you go to hell, I follow you there, trust me, because economics is useful even in the underworld. I hope I've given you insight here into the overall economy. Strong, but I'm fearful because of consumer spending driving the boat. And it's now, we're going to rely on it more going forward, and there's threats. I hope I gave you insight into the labor market. By and large, still good, but weakening. And that once it starts to weaken, it starts to weaken, right? The Fed, inflation, though coming down, isn't low enough for them to get off and saying, we're going to start to cut rates. They're nowhere near there. Hopefully they get there sooner than later. The sooner the better, because we need them to start to lower rates or say they're going to lower rates or say they're going to think about lowering rates. And last but not least, you've got some challenges here. You can't solve where you're located. You can't solve that you're in California. You can't solve that you're in NorCal. But you can certainly attract people and say, this is a great place to live. I came here today, and I was friggin' bowled over at how awesome downtown is. It's beautiful. This is like, it's amazing. I'm going to tell all my friends, Grass Valley, go there for a long weekend. Have a great time. It's beautiful here. You're a friggin' hidden secret. Get the word out. Put some billboards up. Get a bullhorn, you know. Come to Grass Valley. It's amazing. You got some mining, old historic mining. You got pretty. This is a cutesy downtown. Oh my God, get a movie made here. I'm joking. That's a money-losing proposition. But you get the point. Advertise, advertise, advertise. Talk about how awesome it is. Build some cheaper houses, some affordable houses. You know, get people to move here. You'll solve your problem. I hope. And then last but not least, I guess that's it. The recession may come. I hope it doesn't. I think it does. It won't be bad. Don't think about a recession or not. It'll be a week 24. That's generically how to think about it. I'll be taking questions up here. I have time for Q&A? Thank you, boss. So you've listened to me now for like an hour or 2 hours or something. Now it's your turn to ask me questions. Hopefully they aren't too hard, and hopefully I can answer them. Thank you. Oh, yes, sir, please.